designing a framework that can help them, again, either show, yes, that validates that KPI that they think is tried and true, or shows them how that KPI is either connected or not connected to their short and long-term business health.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today. Welcome to another episode. I am thrilled to be here with Derek DeGroat, Director of Marketing Analytics at Iridio by RRD, a great partner, a really great marketer and analytics professional. Derek, thanks so much for being here.
Jesse, I appreciate you having me. Really excited.
Absolutely. So, Derek, I'm really glad to be here with you right now because we're going to learn more about RRD and Iridio through the course of this conversation and your role within it. But I'm excited to talk because Iridio and you in your role, you've rolled out a 4-part measurement framework that guides how Iridio conducts analytics for marketers that you work with. Talk to me a little bit about why now, right? Because I have a 15-year agency background myself, and 99.9% of brands that I ever worked with were operating on last click. And it feels like something is changing right now. And I'm guessing that sense and that change is why you've recommended implementing this kind of framework for your clients. So why now?
Yeah, that's a great question. And yes, the industry is, the landscape is constantly shifting, constantly changing. Yet I think as marketers and marketing teams, the challenge remains the same in some regards. And what I mean by that is marketers still struggle with measurement at the end of the day. And, it's ironic too, because I think now we have more tools at our disposal than probably ever before, between dashboards, incremental lift studies, experimentation platforms, media mix modeling platforms, right on and on. And, despite all of this data, I think a lot of marketing teams still find themselves asking the question, what should we actually do next? And I think that's because performance data, it isn't the same thing as having decision clarity.
I love the spirit of, measurement is only as good as the decision that it unlocks. But I love also what you said that, marketers still struggle with measurement. And that struggle is to understand what's working, right? If they knew what was working, they knew what to do next. I think that marketers have always understood that marketing is the engine that drives growth for brands. They've just struggled to prove it. Talk to me about the framework. What's the solution?
I put together the framework really to address the issue around decision clarity. All right, marketing teams that I think will be most successful are probably not the ones that have the most dashboards to go into and look at to make decisions, but they'll be the ones that build a connected framework, right? Where the different analytical layers like segmentation, like media mix modeling, like in-campaign testing, like weekly optimization, where they all work together. At the end of the day, it's not about really, from a marketer's perspective, it's not just about understanding what happened, but knowing what to do next. In the framework, it was designed and put together in a way so each layer answers a different question, right? And when they work together, that's where I think the analytics, the measurement, it becomes more of a system that is, makes for smarter planning and decision making, as well as execution, right? So it's not just different sets of reporting. There's dashboards, attribution models, MMMs, and not all of those tools are operated and leveraged by the same team, right? So a lot of times these tools are being used in silos, right? You have a one team looking at MMM once a year. You have another team running lift tests, right? You have another team that's hands-on keyboard optimizing weekly in the DSP platforms, right? And then you have teams doing segmentation, and all that does is that it creates confusion around how all of the insights connect to decisions, right? And so what we're trying to do differently at Iridio is we're trying to construct a measurement framework where each analytic layer plays a specific role, right? So it's less about individual tools and more like a system for answering different questions across the entire campaign lifecycle.
Awesome. So let's dive into what the framework is and its components. What you're talking about is segmentation, marketing mix modeling, in-campaign testing, and weekly optimization. Likely not in that order. But let's talk about what the order of operations is and the value that each part of the framework brings. Should we start with segmentation? What is it and why do it?
And I would think of it not necessarily as, order of operations. The way I put together the framework was more in terms of frequency of when each are sort of refreshed. Mm-hmm. Right. So segmentation doesn't necessarily need to be done as frequently as, say, MMM or in-campaign testing or campaign optimization, right? So that's kind of the sequential order, and it's really, again, more of how often are you consulting some of these. But I think with segmentation, it answers the question of who are the customers that we're trying to influence, right? Where do they live? And it also is a key component and input, or can be a key input to the MMM, right? It helps understand budget constraints within, say, a trade area. Obviously important for understanding avails within the target geos, within the zip codes, et cetera. But the importance of segmentation, obviously, is to define your customer. And, that can include looking at new versus existing, looking at high value, low value, lapsed buyers, product affinity, et cetera, right? So, and that's critical. It sets the stage, right? Especially for creative execution, because not all customers behave the same way. Mm-hmm. So you have different stores depending on what markets they're in. They sell the same product, but the audience opportunity could be completely different, right? So each location could have different customer penetration, which would lend itself to having different messaging, different product focus, different targeting strategies and offers at the end of the day. So, that's kind of how the segmentation, sets the stage for customer activation, right? But, again, segmentation alone doesn't tell us the channels or how much to invest, right? For that, right, we have to consult and leverage the MMM.
So I'm starting to pick up on the thread here, Derek, of the orientation of the whole framework being towards decision making, because I think a lot of people think about that kind of audience segmentation as a function, as a planning function, as a strategy function, defining our audience universe. You're talking about it as part of an analytics framework. Do you draw a distinction?
Oh, that's a great question. I think yes, it's segmentation. Obviously, it's going to be generated, from a client's first party data. All right, it's going to be generated from internal reports. So the CRM is going to be a critical layer that helps feed the segmentation. But at the end of the day, the segmentation strategy needs to fit within an overall framework. So as you're making key decisions throughout the year, right, you know what decisions the segmentation is going to help you make at the end of the day.
Awesome. So that segmentation is going to leave you with insight into uh, who the audience is, how big the audience is, how big the opportunity is, maybe how they consume media, and what kind of channels you should consider in terms of reaching them. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think it's a combination. The how they consume media, that starts to get into consumer and market insights.
Hmm.
Um, whereas if you're leveraging um, segmenting your customer base, um, it's probably geared a little more towards customer penetration around your stores,
Hmm.
the different demographics around those stores, the products that um, are like the difference in product sales versus product opportunity around those stores, and what messaging resonates better with customers around different stores within different markets.
Oh, got it. That totally
But
makes
yes, it's
sense.
definitely understanding the different market dynamics um, around the stores, and as well the opportunity. Right, what is the customer penetration around the stores that we want to target?
Gotcha. So it definitely helps with the targeting insight and to prioritize messaging and locations and then budget. Let's keep going in the framework. The next thing is marketing mix modeling. What part of the campaign lifecycle do you implement this?
I'd be remiss to not give a shout out to our partnership with you all at Keen. Because without the partnership, right, this framework wouldn't be possible. And the MMM that that we're leveraging through Keen has really enabled us to it sits at the strategic center of the framework, right? Because it's helping us answer the question: where should we spend? How much should we invest across all the channels? Right? It's analyzing the historical data across marketing channels, external factors, right, and forecasting and helping us predict incremental ROI by channel, the point of diminishing returns, looking at budget allocation, different budget scenarios, right? So the MMM is a strategic layer within the framework, all right, and along with segmentation, that's also a strategic layer, but the key strategic planning layer is MMM, right? It helps us answer questions like: are we over investing? Is there still room to scale within particular channels? Right? What happens if we shift budget from one channel to the next? What happens when we introduce a channel? Right, and that's all possible because of the Keen engine, because it's capturing the model's capturing seasonality, different market dynamics, the cross-channel interactions and relationships between channels, um, and it's providing the big picture view of marketing effectiveness at the end of the day.
Awesome. So segmentation and MMM seem both very oriented towards that macro strategic decision making that you're talking about, and happen, you know, at the onset periodically, right? Um, they're happening at the onset of the campaign. They're happening multiple times. MMMs happening multiple times throughout the year. Segmentation you probably can do, more occasionally than that. It sounds like. Now we're moving into the day-to-day stuff, right? The in-campaign testing. How does that work?
Yeah, like you said, MMM, typically we're refreshing throughout the year, likely on a semi-annual or quarterly cadence, but it's not necessarily designed to test individual campaigns, individual creative or audience strategies,
Mhm.
right? That's where the next like layer in the framework becomes important, and that's in campaign testing, and that the in campaign testing can help answer questions around structuring A/B test. How do different messages play within the markets that we've defined, and it it can help make more near term decisions behind how um, certain campaigns did perform
Mhm.
towards their individual goals. So while the MMM is kind of providing that North Star of forecasting, we still need to execute at the campaign level, and structuring campaign tests that look at how different products or messages can move the needle within the marketplace can help marketers understand different elements of marketing results.
Totally makes sense. And so between that in-campaign testing and weekly optimization, now we're actually looking at, not just how should I invest and what's my budget and what's the right channel, but do I have the right creative? Is it resonating in market? How do I optimize line item one in my DSP versus line item two? Are we still looking at, impressions and clicks and conversions, in platform at that level?
The media teams still need to monitor campaign performance to make real time adjustments, right? So you still need to look at CTR, engagement, frequency, and pacing, right? Because those insights can still drive decisions between reallocating budgets across in campaign, scaling to higher performing creatives, adjusting bidding strategies, et cetera, to make sure you deliver in full, right? Weekly optimization is going to ensure that your campaigns stay efficient, right, and responsive, right. So the in campaign KPIs, I think, are still in place, but but they're now being informed by the other layers. Is kind of the take. So segmentation, right? Again, it's telling us who do we focus on. MMM is telling us where and how much are we investing across channels, and in campaign testing is telling us which audiences and creatives are and audience and creative strategies are working best, and then the weekly optimization is ensuring that we are executing the campaigns efficiently in the marketplace.
Mm-hmm. Totally makes sense. As you're developing this framework, is this addressing a demand that your clients have in terms of more meaningful measurement to answer their organizational questions and allow them to represent marketing in a more accurate and compelling light? Or are you pushing your clients in this direction and telling them that this is how they should be thinking about it?
It's a combination of both, but um, like any martech company, that supports brands and tries to help them make decisions and reach their revenue goals. Our clients come to us with a list of questions daily, right? And some of them overlap, and some of them are asked to different teams that probably aren't equipped to answer them. So this is an attempt to get some organization around the different analytical layers and the different decisions and questions that clients ask and or should be asking throughout the campaign lifecycle, to help them organize when they should be thinking about certain decisions throughout the year, right? So you don't always need to be thinking about segmentation. You don't always need to be thinking about MMM on a weekly basis, right? But if you know when you need to make those decisions, you can plan for that. You can create a schedule, and and have inputs from campaigns feed to the next campaign and so on and so forth. So it helps with the overall strategic framework of how to go to market and really drive campaign results in the right direction. And or if campaigns are not running as expected, right, it allows you the ability to pause, run the appropriate analytic layer or analytic solution to answer the questions that that solution is meant to answer, and then proceed.
This makes a lot of sense. And I asked the question because, I'm thinking about meeting the marketer where they're at, right? We talked about the shift away from last click and multi-touch attribution at the onset of this conversation. But let's also have empathy for the marketer because they've always had a weekly or monthly report that CFOs and CEOs and CMOs are used to receiving. And even though they know that something has to change, I think there's this question of, well, what does it change to? What's more right? So I'm guessing that this framework doesn't just equip the marketer with better decision-making power, but also allows them to set expectations amongst their organization about when the organization is going to get certain questions and when we're going to learn certain things and what we're learning and how we're making decisions about what we've learned to advocate for marketing's contribution to the business and to set expectations with stakeholders about when they're going to get certain insights and when they have to wait.
At the end of the day, every marketer has to report out to their ELT and show that what they're doing is working, and has to tell that story of how they got there, and or if they fell short of organizational goals for whatever reason, whether industry headwinds, environmental, internal, whatever the case may be, right? You need to be able to connect the dots between outcomes, final performance, and what was done, but then also what you're planning to do and what you forecast will happen as a result of any levers that you pull.
Yeah. I was talking to a consultant earlier this week and it came up, like this shift came up and they asked the question of like, well, what even is a marketing conversion, right? And I think that's part of the shift where it used to be like ROAS and we were looking at platform metrics. And Derek, you're still using words like performance and outcomes, right? What does the framework equip the marketer to report back on? What is the KPI that the framework is designed in maximizing?
It's a great question, and it's going to depend. But it's a case where, again, looking at the strategic layers, the segmentation, the MMM, especially the MMM, right? It's a case of designing a framework that answers the key business questions that a particular brand may have, right? So, for example, if a brand traditionally uses a certain KPI as the leading indicator, that's fine. But we can also incorporate certain activity metrics, right, into the key MMM and show either how those are either related or may not be related to overall short and long term, business health, right? So I think it's about understanding what is important to the client in the here and now, designing a framework that can help them, again, either show yes, that validates that KPI that they think is tried and true, or shows them how that KPI is either connected or not connected to their short and long term business health.
Yeah, because this is real stuff, right? There's not only business health at stake, there's bonuses at stake, right? There's internal incentives, there's promotions and careers, not to mention servicing the consumer that brands are built to serve. So this is stuff of real consequence.
Yeah, it absolutely is.
I know from Keen's perspective, the metrics that matter are the metrics that unite the CMO, the CFO, and the CEO, right? Through your segmentation, you're able to separate overperforming store or defend markets versus growth markets, and actually measure if the growth markets are growing because of marketing activities, right? Through the MMM, you could actually connect uh, impressions to short and long-term sales, revenue, and profit, the real P&L level metrics that make the business grow. So there's certainly other metrics that bonuses are based off of and that are going to inform the weekly day-to-day layer or optimization decision frame. But I think the magic of your framework and part of the reason why marketing mix modeling has had the resurgence that it has is because of the ability to connect upper funnel impressions and marketing activities to bottom line sales, revenue, and profit. That's part of the unlock.
We touched on this earlier. It's not something you do just once, right? It's not a set it and forget it tool. And I think it's critical that it's a central part of any framework throughout the campaign life cycle. Is, things happen throughout the year. But, like I mentioned, environmental factors, internal factors, et cetera, that can impact revenue, store traffic, or web visit performance, right? So it's important to refresh the MMM, right? We haven't touched on reconciling actual performance against the model forecast, right? So because when that model does recalibrate the projections and the new plan, it's important to understand, one, are we within the range of our projections? If not, what happened, and how do we move forward? How do we tweak the plan, and what is the new forecast based off of the latest data that we've loaded into the model?
Yeah, that's great. It sounds like your clients can expect real accountability in your forecasting and your measurement. So it's not some story or some strategy fluff. It's a real forecast, a real plan that you can then reconcile against actuals. That's refreshing.
Yeah. Like I said, it answers key business questions throughout the course of the year, right? And that's, at its simplest, is what it's designed to do, is to know where to go and what to use for certain business decisions.
Awesome. So last question for you here, Derek. RRD is a big business, right? And lots of moving pieces, a huge ecosystem, media, print, logistics, data, audiences, identity. How does this framework, how does your group, how do you work with those other divisions from a day-to-day perspective to really connect to those other capabilities?
My group is specifically responsible for providing tools that give our clients the ability to make data-driven decisions at the end of the day. But the broader Iridio, our Donnelly agency, in partnership with Keen, right? We not only can we design and maintain the MMM within Keen, but like you said, we also have a lot of other resources at our disposal. We set atop our own DSP. We have our own printer, right? We can activate across most media channels. So Iridio can operate as a full service AOR. There's actually another area that we didn't even touch on that I think is extremely important to the entire framework. But it's the infrastructure, and that's data management and infrastructure. So having a CDP for your first party data, as well as the infrastructure to capture media spend by channel and activity, and have that be easily accessible. Because in order for these analytic layers to work, you can't facilitate quicker decision making if you're spending weeks trying to compile data to load into the various tools, right? So at Iridio, from data management to what my team does, which is analytic consultation, and tying all of the data points together for a closed loop view to media activation and performance measurement. Iridio can do everything really in between.
Yeah, the old garbage in, garbage out, right? Not to minimize it with nomenclature like that, but I think where we're really aligned is that brands and marketers want to be serious and committed about better decision making, better optimization, better insight into marketing contribution. It starts with infrastructure, with data fidelity, with a commitment to building the fundamentals of data management so that better data can be fed to these decisioning systems that both measure and allow better planning, forecasting, and ultimately decision making. And it's awesome that we get to partner with a company like Iridio and RRD that offers that end-to-end audience and data management all the way through the activation to the measurement, the planning, and the flywheel that comes with that. So what an awesome opportunity for
Very
marketers.
well said.
Derek, thank you again for your partnership. Thanks for showing up today. Any last words for your adoring fans?
No last words other than thank you again for having me. I had a great time, and really appreciate the platform to talk about Keen MMM, our partnership, and the framework and what we're doing here at Iridio and how we're trying to bring this to life and push better solutions for our clients. I appreciate it. So thank you again.
Thanks, Derek. Thank you for listening to another episode today. Please don't forget to follow and subscribe wherever you may be listening. I'm Jesse Math, VP of Strategic Partnerships here at Keen Decision Systems. Thanks for joining us.